Have you ever sat in the quiet of your living room, maybe late at night, when the world has gone still, and felt a wave of unease wash over you? You've raised a family, built a career, faced more storms than you can count. And yet, here you are, wondering why your chest feels tight, why your thoughts won't stop racing, why peace still feels so far away. This stage of life was supposed to bring more clarity, more rest. But instead, for many of us, it brings a different kind of turbulence, one that doesn't come from the outside, but from within. Anxiety, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet ache in your stomach, the sleepless nights, the persistent what-ifs that keep looping in your mind. And maybe you've tried to push through it. You've told yourself to be strong, to be grateful, to keep going. But what if the answer isn't in pushing harder? What if freedom doesn't come from fighting anxiety, but from finally understanding it? Thousands of years ago, long before modern medicine and self-help books, the Buddha spoke about this very struggle, not as a diagnosis, but as a universal experience. He didn't offer quick fixes. He offered a new way of seeing, a deeper way of living. And that's what this video is about. Not another to-do list, not another breathing technique you'll forget in a week, but a shift, a profound shift in how you relate to your mind, your emotions, and your sense of self. I'll share with you the one thought, simple, powerful, and timeless, that helped me and thousands of others loosen anxiety's grip and return to something deeper than calm. Clarity, compassion, and true inner steadiness. This isn't about erasing anxiety forever. It's about never being held hostage by it again. So if you're tired of pretending everything's fine, if you're ready to stop running and start reconnecting with yourself, stay with me. This could be the most important journey you take, not away from anxiety, but straight through it, with eyes open and heart steady. Let's begin, not by trying to fix the storm, but by finally learning how to rest in the middle of it. Chapter 1. The thought beneath the thought. Understanding the true root of anxiety, where anxiety really begins. From a Buddhist perspective, anxiety doesn't start with a situation. It doesn't even start with a feeling. It begins with a thought. But not just any thought. It begins with the kind of thought you don't even realize you're believing. It's the quiet whisper underneath your decisions. If I lose this, I'll fall apart. If they don't love me, I'm not enough. If I don't stay in control, everything will go wrong. These thoughts don't just come and go. They become the lens through which you view the world, and more importantly, yourself. Buddhism calls this attachment, clinging to ideas, identities, outcomes. And anxiety is the natural byproduct of that clinging. We fear losing what we've tied our worth to, and we fear never getting what we think we need to finally feel at peace. The anxiety cycle no one talks about. Let's say you're worried about your job, not just the deadlines or the workload, but the fear that if you don't perform well, you'll be seen as a failure. What's really fueling that anxiety? Not the job itself, but the belief, my worth depends on my performance. Now you feel pressure, you overwork, you lose sleep. Then the more tired you are, the harder it becomes to perform well, which triggers more anxiety, which leads to more exhaustion. This is what Buddhism describes as dukkha, a cycle of suffering created not by life itself, but by how we relate to life. Anxiety isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that somewhere you've started believing a thought that isn't fully true. What the Buddha taught about the root of suffering. Over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha taught something astonishingly relevant to our modern lives. All suffering, including anxiety, has a cause. And if it has a cause, it can be understood. And if it can be understood, it can be transformed. The root cause, he said, is tanha, often translated as craving or thirst. We crave safety, approval, certainty. We crave to feel in control of things that were never meant to be controlled. And when the world doesn't bend to our desires, anxiety arises. But here's the grace in it. If craving creates anxiety, then clarity dissolves it. Not by removing all fear, but by revealing that you don't need to believe everything your mind tells you. The one thought that begins to set you free. So what is this one thought that begins to change everything? It's this. This too will change. Simple, ancient, and quietly revolutionary. Because when you fully understand impermanence, not just in theory, but in your bones, you begin to soften your grip on control. You start to see that emotions come and go. Thoughts come and go. Identities, roles, relationships, they too come and go. And what remains beneath it all is you, not the anxious you, not the performing you, just the quiet, aware presence that has always been there. In the next chapter, we'll explore how you can stop running from anxiety and start listening to it. This is where anxiety stops being an enemy and becomes a messenger. Chapter 2, From Reaction to Presence, The Art of Sitting with Anxiety. Why we resist feeling. What we feel, most of us aren't taught how to feel. We're taught how to manage, suppress, and get through. So when anxiety surfaces, we often resist it with everything we have. We distract ourselves with screens. We rationalize it away. We judge ourselves for feeling it in the first place. But in doing that, we unknowingly feed it. In Buddhist psychology, there's a teaching that's both simple and profound. What we resist persists. Because resistance is a form of energy. It keeps the emotion alive, trapped in the system. It's like trying to push down a beach ball in the water. The harder you press, the more violently it bounces back. But here's the shift. What if you didn't push at all? What if you let the ball float, wobble, and settle? Emma was a school teacher in her late 40s when she came to one of my workshops. From the outside, she had it all together. Confident, capable, always composed. But during a silent meditation, something unexpected happened. Her hands began to tremble. Her breath caught. Tears streamed down her face. Later, she whispered to me, "I haven't been still in years. I didn't realize how much I was carrying." You see, Emma had built her life around control, being the calm one, the responsible one. But underneath that control was a deep fear of falling apart. And it wasn't until she stopped doing that she finally felt what was true. Not to fix it, not to solve it, but simply to let it be there, acknowledged, witnessed, held. That moment was the beginning of her healing. The Buddhist approach. Mindful observation. In Buddhism, we are not taught to fight anxiety. We are taught to observe it, without judgment, without clinging, without resistance. This is what mindfulness really means. Not emptying the mind, not staying perfectly calm, but simply being present with whatever arises exactly as it is. When an anxious thought shows up, instead of spiraling into it, we say, this is a moment of anxiety. This is what fear feels like in the body. This is the mind trying to protect me, even if it's mistaken. You create space, not to get rid of the feeling, but to stop being ruled by it. That space, that breath between thought and reaction, is where transformation begins. A gentle practice. Befriending anxiety. Try this simple practice the next time anxiety visits. Pause, sit, or lie down. Let the body be supported. Notice, where is the anxiety in your body? Your chest, belly, jaw? Breathe into that area without trying to change it. Name it softly. Say gently in your mind, "This is anxiety." Like greeting an old friend, firm, kind, and unafraid. Place a hand over your heart. Feel the warmth of your own presence. Remind yourself, I can feel this without needing to fix it right now. Let it stay or go. You're not forcing anything. You're just allowing what already is. You'll be surprised how quickly anxiety begins to shift, not because it was defeated, but because it was finally allowed to breathe, becoming the ocean, not the wave. Think of your thoughts and emotions like waves on the surface of the sea. Some are calm, some are stormy, but they all come and go. Anxiety is one wave. You, however, are the ocean, vast, deep, still beneath it all. When you begin to relate to your anxiety not as a threat, but as a passing pattern of the mind, you tap into something deeper than peace. You tap into wisdom, the wisdom to sit with your own pain, the strength to stop running, the clarity to say, I don't need to be fearless, I just need to be here. Chapter 3, The Breath Beneath It All. Finding steadiness in the midst of anxiety. Breath, the anchor we always have. No matter what's happening around you, no matter how uncertain, chaotic, or painful, there's one thing that's always with you: your breath. You don't have to buy it, earn it, or understand it. It's just there, like a quiet friend waiting to bring you back home. In Buddhist practice, the breath is more than just oxygen. It's a sacred thread that links body to mind, moment to moment. When the breath is shallow, rapid, chaotic, so is the mind. When the breath slows down, softens, the nervous system begins to shift. The breath doesn't solve anxiety. It simply creates a space where anxiety no longer has full control. A simple breathing practice for anxiety. This isn't a technique you need to master. This is a remembering, a returning. Try this the next time anxiety swells. Pause. Sit or stand still. Place one hand over your heart. Inhale slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Feel the breath entering, not forcing, just noticing. Hold for a count of 2. Let the breath settle inside you. Exhale gently through the mouth for a count of 6. Imagine the tension leaving your body, like mist rising. Repeat for 3 to 5 cycles. No need to change the anxiety, just soften around it. You may notice your heart rate slowing. You may feel your shoulders drop, or you may simply feel a little more here. That's more than enough. Why the breath works when nothing else does. When the mind is racing, it tries to pull you into the future. What if? What next? How do I fix this? But the breath always exists in the now. And that's the magic. You can't breathe in the future. You can't breathe in the past. The breath invites you into the only place where life truly happens. Right here, right now. And anxiety, which feeds on uncertainty and projection, begins to weaken when it no longer has your full attention. Make it a gentle ritual. Consider this: 1 breath before you answer that stressful email, 3 breaths before you walk into a difficult conversation, 5 breaths when you wake up before the day begins. These aren't just wellness habits. They're acts of remembrance, reminding yourself that you are not your stress, you are not your to-do list, you are not the anxious voice in your head. You are the one who breathes through it all. You are the space it passes through. In the next chapter, we'll explore how self-compassion, the quiet art of being kind to yourself, can radically shift how you experience anxiety. Chapter 4, The Gentle Strength Within. How self-compassion disarms anxiety. Somewhere along the way, many of us learned that being hard on ourselves was noble, that if we were just a little tougher, a little more disciplined, a little less emotional, then maybe we'd be worthy. Then maybe we'd finally feel calm, in control, at peace. But here's the truth, one that many of us discover only after years of inner struggle. You cannot hate yourself into healing. You cannot bully yourself into calm. And anxiety does not disappear when we judge ourselves for having it. In fact, it grows stronger. What softens it, what truly begins to heal it, is something we were rarely taught: compassion, especially for ourselves. The inner critic we all carry. Have you ever noticed the voice inside your head when you're anxious? It doesn't just say, "I feel scared." It often says, "Why are you like this? What's wrong with you?" Other people don't fall apart over things like this. That voice isn't trying to destroy you. It was built long ago, out of protection, out of pressure, out of pain. But over time, it becomes a kind of inner prison. Because when anxiety arises and you respond with self-criticism, you create a loop. Anxiety arises. You judge yourself for feeling anxious. That judgment adds more tension. The anxiety increases, and around you go. But there's another way. Kara was a 52-year-old therapist when I met her. Wise, kind, and deeply attuned to the emotions of others. But behind her empathy was a private shame. "I've always felt too sensitive," she confessed. "Like I need to toughen up." Even as a therapist, I've never fully made peace with how deeply I feel things. Anxiety for her wasn't just fear. It was the fear of being judged for feeling too much. So we began with a simple practice. Every time she felt anxious, instead of analyzing it or trying to fix it, she placed a hand over her heart and said softly, "This is hard, but I am here with myself." That was it. No fixing, no forcing, just presence. And something remarkable began to happen. The anxiety didn't always go away, but it stopped defining her. She stopped seeing her sensitivity as a flaw and began to see it as a doorway to depth, to love, to presence. What the Buddha taught about compassion. In Buddhist tradition, metta, loving kindness, is one of the 4 immeasurable qualities of the awakened heart. But it's not just about being nice. It's about turning towards suffering, ours and others, with warmth instead of aversion. And this includes the suffering of anxiety. We don't push it away. We don't shame ourselves for it. We greet it with gentleness. "Ah, dear one, you are hurting. I see you. I'm here." This inner tenderness is not weakness. It is a deep kind of courage, the courage to stay with ourselves even when we feel broken. The strength you've been waiting for. Many of us wait for life to get easier so we can finally be at peace. But what if peace doesn't come after the storm? What if peace is how we hold ourselves during the storm? That is self-compassion, the soft, steady voice that says, "Even now, even like this, I am worthy of kindness." It doesn't erase anxiety, but it dissolves the shame wrapped around it. And in that softening, something remarkable happens. You begin to trust yourself again. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to build a life that supports your peace, not just during moments of crisis, but in the ordinary rhythms of your day. You'll learn how to create sacred spaces, set gentle boundaries, and return to what truly nourishes you. Because healing isn't just what happens in meditation, it's also how you live. Chapter 5. Creating a life that holds you. How environment and ritual heal anxiety. Healing doesn't just happen during moments of crisis. It happens in the quiet hours, the mundane routines, the in-between spaces where no one is watching. We often think of peace as something we have to chase, something out there. But more often than not, peace is not found, it's built. Not all at once, not perfectly, but gently, intentionally, and with love. And it begins with this question. Your environment is speaking to you. Our surroundings constantly communicate with our nervous system. A cluttered space sends a message. There's too much to hold. Loudness, chaos, constant interruption. You're not safe here. Lack of beauty or stillness. You don't deserve softness. But here's the hope. You don't need to escape your life to feel peace. You can begin by creating small sanctuaries right where you are. A corner with a candle, a chair by the window, a drawer that stays organized, a room where you go to exhale, not perform. These aren't luxuries. They're signals to your body that say, you're allowed to rest here. You are worthy of calm. Even one small shift, removing clutter, lighting a soft lamp, playing gentle music, can begin to reset your entire inner state. Gentle boundaries are acts of compassion. Creating a life that holds you also means learning to say no with grace. No to overcommitment. No to people who drain your spirit. No to always being the strong one. Saying no doesn't mean closing your heart. It means recognizing that your energy is sacred and your nervous system deserves protection. Boundaries aren't barriers. They're bridges to a more sustainable, honest, and healing life. You are not selfish for needing space. You are not weak for needing quiet. You are wise for choosing what helps you stay whole. A practice. Build your inner refuge. Here's a gentle practice to begin creating a life that holds you. Choose one space in your home, a corner, a chair, a shelf. Make it yours. Keep it uncluttered and beautiful in your eyes. Visit it daily, even just for a minute. Let it become a place you return to, not to fix yourself, but to remember yourself. Create a ritual. Light a candle. Breathe 5 times. Say a phrase like, "This is my place to be soft. This is my pause between all the doing." In the next chapter, we'll explore a subtle but powerful truth, that joy, even the quiet kind, is a medicine for anxiety. Chapter 6. Quiet Joy. How Gratitude and Wonder Transform Anxiety. When we think of healing anxiety, joy is usually not the first thing that comes to mind. We think of tools, coping strategies, ways to make the pain stop. But here's the quiet truth many forget. Joy is not the opposite of anxiety. Joy is the space that anxiety forgets exists. It's not about being cheerful or pretending everything's fine. It's about discovering that even in the midst of worry, there are moments, tiny, gentle, sacred, that still sparkle. Moments that say, life is still here. You are still here. The mind forgets, but the heart remembers. Anxiety is future-focused. It pulls us forward, into the what-ifs, the unknowns, the spiraling possibilities. But gratitude and wonder bring us back, not just to the present, but to the beauty of the present. The smell of morning coffee, a breeze across your skin, the laugh of someone you love, light pouring through the window like honey. These things don't fix anxiety, but they ground you. They remind your body and soul that not everything is falling apart. Sometimes something is blooming. You just weren't looking. Samantha was a chef in her late 40s, recovering from burnout and years of hidden panic attacks. When she came to me, she said, "I've spent so long scanning for what's going wrong, I forgot how to see what's okay." So we started small. Each morning before touching her phone, she sat at her kitchen table and wrote down 3 things she could be grateful for. Some days it was simple. The smell of toast, my favorite sweater, I woke up. Some days it was deeper. I didn't panic yesterday. I felt loved. I didn't feel alone. At first it felt pointless, but after a few weeks, something shifted. She said, "I started looking for moments to write down, even before they happened." That's the magic of gratitude. It doesn't just reflect joy, it trains the mind to notice it. And when joy becomes visible, anxiety loses some of its power. The Buddhist heart of joy. In Buddhist tradition, there is a word for this kind of joy, mudita. It means sympathetic joy, the ability to feel delight in your own and others' happiness, without clinging or comparison. It is the antidote to envy, the balm for inner scarcity, and one of the most radical, restorative forces in the mind. Because mudita doesn't wait for life to be perfect. It finds beauty in the imperfection. A flower growing through concrete, a stranger holding a door, your own breath arriving again and again without needing to be earned. This kind of joy doesn't depend on external peace. It creates peace from within. A practice. Finding joy in the ordinary. Here's a simple practice to help invite joy back into your life. Every morning, write down 3 things you're grateful for. Big or small, Don't judge them, just name them. Every evening, recall one moment that made you smile, however briefly. Write it down or simply revisit it in your heart. Throughout the day, pause when something beautiful catches your attention. Say quietly, "This is joy, this is what it feels like." By naming joy, you anchor it. By noticing it, you make space for more of it. Over time, this becomes a muscle, a kind of inner lens that helps you see what's nourishing, not just what's threatening. Even in the dark, there is light. Joy doesn't mean you'll never feel anxious again. It doesn't mean you'll always be happy, but it does mean you'll no longer forget that light still lives in you, even on hard days. Anxiety says something bad is coming. Joy whispers back, yes, and something beautiful is already here. You are allowed to feel both. You are allowed to be afraid and grateful. You are allowed to hold space for your pain and your aliveness. That is not contradiction, that is wholeness. In the next chapter, we'll begin weaving together everything you've learned, transforming insight into rhythm and rhythm into a way of being. Chapter 7, Turning Practice into Path, Living the Teachings in Everyday Life. By now you've gathered pieces of peace, moments of stillness, whispers of compassion, breaths that soften the sharpness, small lights of joy that broke through the storm. But healing isn't just a collection of tools, it's a way of being. It's not what you do once a week when things fall apart. It's how you choose to meet life, moment by moment. And that's what this chapter's about. Not adding more to your life, but weaving what you already know into how you live. From practice to path. There's a difference between practicing and living. Practice happens on the mat, in the journal, during meditation. But the path, that's your kitchen, your commute, your relationships, your silence. Many people think spiritual life has to be separate from ordinary life. But the Buddha taught the opposite. He showed us that enlightenment isn't found by escaping the world. It's found by relating to it differently. Washing dishes with presence, breathing during an argument instead of reacting, listening fully without planning your reply, choosing rest when you've always chosen hustle. These aren't small acts. They are sacred revolutions, done quietly, consistently. You don't have to be perfect, just present. There will be days when you forget, days when anxiety gets loud, days when you skip your rituals or fall into old habits. That's okay. This isn't about perfection. It's about returning over and over. I forgot. And now I remember. That too is part of the path. You are not failing when you fall. You are learning how to get up with kindness. A practice, turning the day into your teacher. Instead of waiting for the right time to practice presence, use life itself as your practice ground. Try this. When you're washing your hands, feel the water. When you're standing in line, breathe deeply. When a loved one speaks, look in their eyes fully. When you make a mistake, place a hand over your heart and say, "This is a moment of being human." Let every moment be an invitation, not to perform, but to arrive. This is who you've been becoming. You may not feel enlightened. You may not have all the answers, but you have changed. You've softened. You've listened. You've shown up again and again with tenderness. That is the path, not walking above the world, but walking through it with your heart open, your breath steady, and your steps rooted in presence. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are already walking your way home. In the next chapter, the final one, we'll reflect on what it truly means to live in freedom. Chapter 8, The Freedom Within, Redefining Peace in a World That Never Stops. We live in a world that moves fast, a world that praises strength, certainty, and having it all together. A world that often mistakes performance for worth and busyness for importance. And in that kind of world, it's easy to think that peace comes from finally getting it right, from fixing everything, from arriving at a place where nothing hurts anymore. But healing, the kind we've been walking toward, reveals something far more honest. Freedom isn't when everything calms down. Freedom is when you know how to remain calm within it all. Peace is not perfection. If we wait for life to be perfect before we exhale, we'll hold our breath forever. There will always be unanswered questions, unfinished to-do lists, emotions that catch us off guard, moments of fear, pain, confusion. But when we live with mindfulness and compassion, we begin to see we can feel anxious and still be grounded. We can feel lost and still be deeply connected. We can feel fear and still walk forward with love. True peace doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from trusting that we don't have to. What real freedom feels like. Real freedom isn't flashy. It's not a highlight reel. It's quiet, subtle, often invisible to others. It's the breath you take instead of lashing out, the nap you give yourself without guilt, the moment you say no and feel relief instead of shame, the ability to sit with discomfort without running. Real freedom is the space inside you that doesn't collapse when things get hard. It's not never falling. It's knowing how to get up gently and begin again. A practice, your own definition of peace. To end this journey, here's a gentle practice that helps you reclaim peace, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. Sit quietly, close your eyes, take 3 soft, deep breaths. Ask yourself, what does peace feel like in my body? Not what it should feel like, what it actually feels like for you. Place your hands over your heart. Whisper gently, I don't have to earn this. I only have to remember it. Repeat a simple phrase. Even now, I am safe to be me. Even now, I am whole. Even now, I am free. Let these words sink into your bones. You don't need to feel 100% calm. You just need to stop leaving yourself. That's what freedom feels like. This is the beginning, not the end. You've walked through a long and beautiful journey. You've learned to sit with anxiety, to breathe into presence, to offer yourself compassion instead of judgment, to notice joy, create sacred space, and build rhythms that hold you, to redefine strength as softness and peace as presence. This isn't the end. It's a doorway, a quiet one, a sacred one that leads not to someone else's version of peace, but to your own. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are becoming more you with every breath, and that is more than enough. Maybe you're not always fearless. Maybe the anxiety still visits. But now you meet it differently. You meet it with space, with breath, with kindness. You remember that even in moments of doubt, you are never alone. You are walking a sacred path, a path where softness is strength, where silence is a language, where presence is enough, and where the destination isn't somewhere out there. It's right here, inside you, always has been. So when the world feels too fast, when the mind gets too loud, when the heart feels tired, come home, not to a place, but to yourself. You know the way now, and you don't have to walk it alone anymore.